Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to Female Filmmakers Fuse with Alexa Polar and Robin Pabello, only on LA Talk Radio.
Thank you for tuning in. My name's Alexa Polar. I'm your host for Female Filmmakers Fuse Podcast. Welcome to this lovely, gloomy Sunday. I love it. I don't know. I do. I love it. To call in, number 818-602-4929. That's 818-602-4929. I'll go one more time really slow because I've noticed I go way too fast. 818-602-4929. You can always tune in live via LA Talk Radio website or download the app. It's free to download. There's a lot of great content here. And you can always catch us later on iTunes, Google Play, all those great podcast platforms. And on YouTube, we do put the shows up live on YouTube. Not live, I'm sorry. We do put the shows on YouTube, so it makes it easier to share on social media. Real quick reminder, don't forget that it's coming up in March for the elevator pitch. If you want to join that contest, send us your script. The top script will be produced. So it doesn't cost anything to be a part of that. Just make sure that your script is registered, whether it's copywritten or through the Writers Guild. So you should do that regardless. And the Female Filmmakers Fuse 3rd Annual Film Festival, we're still accepting submissions. Early bird deadline has already passed, so now we're at the regular deadline. Don't know exactly when that is, but we are still accepting submissions. And let's get to why we're here today. I'm really excited. So I have someone over the phone who could not be here because of the weather. So Ryan, where are you located?
I am up by Modesto, California.
Holy heck! So he's in Modesto.
Yeah, I've been watching. I had a couple of meetings and some stuff scheduled in LA this weekend, and was planning, of course, to be in the studio with you. And just watching the weather forecast over the past few days, when I started to see freezing rain and snow on Sunday morning and on Saturday and all that, it just sort of became a little alarming. And I said, I can call into the show and I can probably put the meetings off a couple of days.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. When you sent me that message saying the snow, and I was like, where's he coming from? I was like, snow. I'm in LA. What are you talking about?
I have about a 5-hour drive down.
Okay.
4 hours on a really sunny, good day when, you don't have any weather issues, but it's a good 5 probably with the weather that we're currently having.
Understood. And safety is priority always. So I have Diana, and I have Robert. So I'm going to have each of you introduce yourselves correctly because I am horrible with last names. I probably am not even saying my last name correctly. So I'll have each of you introduce yourselves. Ryan, I'll start with you, and then from there we'll go from Diana down. So Ryan, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I am Ryan Katzenbach. I am a filmmaker.
Perfect.
And I am Diana Maiocco, and I am a producer.
Awesome.
And I'm Robert Michael, and I'm an actor and composer.
Awesome. See, now if you're listening and you're wondering why Robert and Diana sound super clear, it's because they are actually in the studio with me, and Ryan is in Modesto. So a few things I want to ask quickly just to get it out of the way. I would like to know, I understand anyone that's listening is thrown off and being like, wait, I heard 2 male voices. Yes. I like the fact that we have men on this show because I want to encourage that, especially with any man that encourages doing projects that are women-led, whether it's having women in the key roles, whether it's in the crew and cast lead roles, and are super supportive of women filmmakers and whatnot. So that's why I feel I have the 2 correct gentlemen to be on the show with us. So thank you for that. So I want to ask each of you quickly, what led you to start into this industry? Why did you get into this industry? How did that come up? So Ryan, we'll start with you.
How I got into film. Well, I started off back in the mid-'90s as a book publisher, and started a little niche publishing company doing nonfiction titles, 1 or 2 a year. And one of our books got picked up by 20th Century Fox. Just strangely enough, it just happened to be that I gave the manuscript to another writer, and they fell in love with it and wanted to pursue it. And the next thing I know, we were in development on a film. So, and I've been at this ever since. And so I'm here by accident.
No, and that's great. That does happen a lot. I do notice that. And sometimes I do recommend that with anyone that has a story to tell, like their own personal story. I always tell them, like, I think you should write it as a novel first, as a book, whether it's an autobiography or if you're doing it in a fiction way where you want to tell it differently, nonfiction, fiction way, however you want to do it. I always say go that route first, because if your book does well, then Hollywood will be calling. That's just a part of it that I've noticed. Like, it's not always the case, but if your book does do well and you can prove it, like, look, I have readers, I think people would want to see this on the big screen or small screen, wherever they want to see it. You have a better chance if you start that way. So I do notice that.
Yeah, and you see so often now some of the biggest movies that are coming out are based on books.
Exactly.
So it's to jump off what you were saying, that's absolutely what people should be doing.
Yeah. Diana, how did you start into this industry?
Well, I'm originally from New York, and I started out as a media buyer in New York City, meaning I represent a huge company with their advertising budgets for television.
Nice. Okay.
So, and being in that business, obviously I was interested in television at the time, and then I started reading scripts for the company because I wanted us to get involved in sponsorships. And then on the side, I got involved with a website where I interviewed the cast and crew from the TV show Moonlighting, which starred Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd, and it's called moonlighting21.com. If anyone wants to go to the website and read the interviews, we did a ton of interviews with writers, producers, directors, actors. So once I got involved with that, then I thought, you know what, I'd like to get involved in production. So then I ended up moving from New York to Los Angeles, and then I met Ryan, and then we ended up doing the Amityville documentary that ended up on Reels.
Oh, awesome. Very cool. And Robert?
It's interesting, actually, how I got started in film, because I never thought I would be, to be honest. Oh, thanks. That makes it so much easier. I always thought growing up that I was going to be doing live stage and musical theater. That's, living in Michigan, they always told you, don't go to L.A. L.A.'s the dangerous city. New York's where it's at.
Right.
And so I went to New York, and I hated it. Like, I would go there to visit, but I could not work there. I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do? So I had an agent out there. He's like, hey, I got some work for you in Los Angeles. Why don't you just try that? I'm like, great. So I came out here not thinking that film was anything that I was going to want to do. And I instantly fell in love with it. Yeah. And since then, like now I've booked the series American Princess. Hopefully some other things that are in the works as well with the same executive producer. And then I was in Titanic Sinking the Mist with Ryan and Diana. And that was how I got introduced to these people. They create amazing work. I will praise that to Kingdom Come. They are the best people to work with. And they really reinstilled that, like, I really want to be out here and I really want to be in film. So here I am today, just plugging away day by day.
Oh, that's awesome. And I've known you for quite some time, for quite a couple of years now. And the reason why I always gravitate to you with any project that I work on is because I like dealing with true talent. And especially old school. Like you don't find, it's really odd and rare to find someone that has what they used to call triple threats. And you, Robert, you have that. And so that's why I always, whether there's music involved or not, I always go to you because you have that and that natural ability. So I do recommend that. And I always recommend you, and you know that since I've known you.
And in the same way, I mean, I gravitate to people even behind the camera, like Ryan. To his testament, he's a director, he's a producer, he does editing, he does everything under the sun. And to have those people both on and off camera benefits immensely. Like Diana, the same way, she does so many different things. You do so many different things. So you have the actors that, they might be the actor, singer, dancer, composer, all of these, but at the same time, it works so well when you have somebody else behind the camera that does so many different things, because you can make the project that much greater.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I have to throw out there, that that's one of the great benefits of not having any budget and not having any money. It forces you to be very diverse and very creative. It's like, how much to edit a film? How much is it going to cost to hire an editor? Oh, I guess I'll learn how to do that myself.
This is true. This is true. That is something that I, as an independent filmmaker, you find you're forced to learn certain things. And then also it's great when you do find someone that is good at what they're doing and is able to understand where you're coming from and be just as supportive. Because I know there's a lot of people in this industry where they just want the pay. And I can understand and respect that. And when I get to that level, surely it's going to be different. But when I'm not and I'm still independent, I would like to work with people that have the same mindsets and goals. And they both want to achieve success, whether together, it's preferably, because if you're working on a project and there's zero budget for this, but we can help each other out and we both want to do this, then I think it works out that way.
Absolutely.
And again, not to take away, I always try to get the funding the best way I can to make sure people are paid or taken care of. I don't like to try to do a project without funding, but if it comes down to that, I always try to see what's my alternative. And that's why I always work well with you, Bobby, because I used to call you Bobby. That's what I call you.
That's okay. That's okay. I just say Robert Michael because if I didn't if it's just like it's a union thing.
Yeah, no,
they're
I get you.
Who's Robert Michael? I've never heard of him before.
So I want to discuss this. There's a couple projects we're going to be talking about today, but I really want to get into the Ronnie Chasen. Is that how you said her last name?
Yes.
Correct.
I remember when that was just a shock in this industry. And if listening doesn't know who she is, she was a publicist. She was very influential. She was loved by many. And she was tremendous at what she did. And she was killed tragically. And I recall how bizarre that whole case was when it first started, because it was a mystery. There was reports that there was gunshots in the area, but then later they weren't sure if it was that and that she just, got into a weird accident. And there was a lot of things going on because the way they found the vehicle and whatnot. And after that, it was like some time passed right before they caught someone and said he was a person of interest. But it was really odd to me because then that person ended up. Was it a shootout or did he kill himself? I don't recall that part of it.
He actually killed himself.
He killed himself,
and it was just under very, very bizarre circumstances. And if you want, I can walk you through what happened that night and give you kind of an overview.
No, yeah, please. That's why I want to talk about it.
So you're very right. Ronnie was a real go-getter, very, very influential, publicist. She really sort of invented her business and carved out a niche for herself in Los Angeles that no one else had ever done. Up until the time that Ronnie came along, it was almost kind of like people assumed that music just fell out of the sky. That the music that you heard in a film, it just landed on your desk one day and here it was, and let's put it in a film. And it was Ronnie who sort of found a lot of musicians. Like, she really created Hans Zimmer, who is one of the biggest composers of our day at this point. And, it was because of her that Hans really got his first start. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but, the Driving Miss Daisy score from the movie that was produced by Richard and Lily Zanuck, they had a very small budget for music. And it was kind of, as it was explained to me by Lily, the budget wasn't really big enough to bring in a big composer and all the musicians to do a regular score. So it was suggested that they have this sort of symphonic score that that Hans would do, and he was willing to do it for the money that they had, and everybody was kind of like, I don't know about this. And of course, what we do know now is that he produced one of the most iconic movie scores, in the last 30-40 years. When you hear his music, that's Driving Miss Daisy. And it was Ronnie that brought this young Hans Zimmer to the Xanax and said, "This guy's really good. You should use him." And after that, she sort of began to represent musicians. She, you know, it was really something that no one focused on, and she created kind of the modern day template that we see for the Oscar, for campaigning for an Oscar. She's really sort of the one who created that. She was a dynamo at what she did. She was phenomenal at what she did. And she worked for Rogers & Cowan in Los Angeles in the 1970s. They were like the big premier agency. They sort of invented public relations for movies, you know, in the current day incarnation that we see. And she worked for them for a number of years, and then she went to MGM as head of publicity for a short while. Then in about 1994, she went out on her own and she started Chasen & Company, and she did her thing from 1994 to 2010. She was responsible for winning several more Oscars, for like The Hurt Locker being one of them. And on November 15th, 2010, it was a Monday night, she was attending the premiere of the movie Burlesque. And they were at the Hollywood Theater, or at the Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. And about midnight, she left the after party, which had moved down the street at the W Hotel. She went down Argyle, made a right onto Sunset, and drove Sunset into Beverly Hills. She got to the corner of Sunset and Whittier, stopped her car supposedly for the red light, the red arrow. She was going to make a left onto Whittier. And as she's sitting there, a perpetrator came up to the car, opened fire 4 times, hit her in the back, the shoulder, and several times in the chest. 2 of the rounds that went into her were considered rapidly fatal, which means 60 seconds or less. Ronnie managed to drive the car, the Mercedes-Benz E350 Coupe, about a quarter of a mile until she lost control and ran up onto the curb and struck a concrete utility post, knocking it down. And of course, that prompted a number of calls to 911. So the cops arrived just, a few minutes later, and they're not really sure what they have. They're not sure if this is someone who fell asleep behind the wheel or if this is a drunk driver, in this solo car accident. The paramedics, of course, respond, and it's not until the paramedics actually get Ronnie out of the car and get her on a backboard that they realize that she's been shot 4 times. So they immediately rush her to Cedars, of course, and they get to Cedars. They do all of the, evasive, they take all the evasive action that they can to try and save her. But at 1:12 a.m. on the morning of November 16th, she was pronounced dead. And that's pretty much the story of what happened to her. And then it sort of gets more bizarre from there, because the cops spend the next 2 weeks tearing her life apart. They're confiscating her emails. They're confiscating her computers at work. They're taking her computers at home. They're going through her phone records, and they really turn up nothing. I mean, there's no, she was never married. She didn't have any kids. So you can strike the possibility of like an ex-husband or an ex-boyfriend out of the equation, because there was just, Ronnie was just all about work. She just didn't really have a big personal life. And there were no bad business dealings. There was just nothing there that you would typically find, that you would associate with a homicide. As we know, homicides usually involve money, sex, or revenge in some way, and they could find nothing. So they get a tip from America's Most Wanted sometime around the Thanksgiving weekend going into the 1st of December. And in getting that tip, this guy who lives at the Harvey Apartments on Santa Monica Boulevard in East Hollywood says that he thinks there's an African-American guy who is his neighbor, and he thinks that he's responsible for the crime. So the cops, take a statement, and they proceed to sort of watch this guy and keep an eye on him. And finally, they go in to question him in the lobby of the Harvey Apartments. And initially, he wasn't there. And so the cops sort of stake it out and they wait on him, and eventually he comes in. And when he comes in about 5:30, 5:45 on December 1st, 2010, they proceed to try and ask him a few questions, at which point he backs himself into a small alcove and produces a .38 handgun from his jacket pocket and shoots himself in the head right in front of the cops. And, of course, he's dead. And then later the police will have a press conference to conclude that the round that he used to kill himself with ballistically matches the round that several of the rounds that were found in Ronnie Chase's body.
They did that at the same moment that they did that at that moment when he killed himself. How many minutes afterwards, or how many hours afterwards?
As far as the ballistics match,
yes.
it was actually a little bit more than a week.
Oh, okay.
They turned the bullets over to the L.A. County Sheriff's Department's crime lab, and of course they were the ones that I think around the 7th of December, roughly a week later, they issued a preliminary finding saying that it was a match. And I think it was the 8th, the next day, that the police department had a press conference and announced that the crime, that they thought that Harold Smith was the guy who did it.
Okay. Now, you're doing a documentary that you guys are you guys done with the documentary? Are you still working on it? Is it a documentary or is it kind of like
it's kind of a docu-series.
Docu-series, okay.
It's right now, it's in the editing stages right now. We still have some recreations. We still have a few more interviews to shoot, but we're pretty far advanced into the story. I mean, we're I would say probably 85% there, and getting very close. And the focus of the show has really become more about the investigation that was completed, because we have found some just questions that are just not answered. We don't think that the investigation went as far as it should have. We think that there were critical witnesses and people. To give you for instance, that night at the premiere of Burlesque and the after party, Ronnie was there because she was representing Diane Warren. And Diane Warren had a song in the movie Burlesque, "You Haven't Heard the Last of Me Yet." And Ronnie and Diane were obviously, she'd been representing Diane for about a decade. And for instance, the police never questioned Diane nor her business manager that was also there. Never asked them, what was Ronnie's state of mind when she left that night? Was she upset about anything? Did she mention to you that she was fighting with anyone about anything? This is like a pretty critical thing that you do in a homicide investigation. You talk to the person who last saw this woman alive.
Right.
There were other friends that had seen Ronnie within a few days of the homicide. None of them that I've talked to, not one of them were questioned. Not one of them were brought in and said, "Hey, can you tell us, what was Ronnie's state of mind? Was she being, bothered or chased by somebody, or did she say anything to indicate that she thought she was in danger?" None of that happened. We have found that there have been various forensic things that are normal when you have a shooting that were not done, by the police department in the course of their investigation. There's just so many questions surrounding this case, and that's what ultimately sort of drew me into it, and what sort of, captured my imagination and made me say, wait a minute, this doesn't sound quite right.
So do you think that when they close the case, basically saying like this individual didn't, that's it, we figured it out, case closed, do you think that's actually what it is, or do you think there's more to it?
I went into this sort of believing that, as I said to the police department when our relationship began, which was very adversarial, I said, look, just because I, as a filmmaker, as a documentary producer, just because I don't understand why you believe that this guy did it, and I haven't seen all of the evidence, doesn't mean that this guy didn't do it.
Right.
Okay. And I began asking the police department, I'm like, will you please show me the smoking gun? Okay. Because, if he did it, he did it. I mean, we'll end up doing kind of an interesting documentary no matter what. But if he did it, and we'll say that. And they just wouldn't produce anything that demonstrated that he did. There was, and literally the last report, because understand, Alexa, one of the things to back up, one of the things that happened in this process was I began asking, as I began to grow more curious about the case, I began asking the Beverly Hills Police Department for the case files. Can I see some of the narrative reports? Can I see crime scene photos? Can I see these things? And of course, those things under California law are exempt from disclosure. The Public Records Act orders that any government public record be turned over except for police investigations. And that applies to an investigation, whether it's open, closed, cold, solved, unsolved, whatever you want to say. And so I knew that when I began asking questions, I knew that legally I didn't have any authority to command them to, produce these documents. But I just thought it was very odd that they were so secretive. And another aspect that was kind of upsetting was the autopsy. In California, at the minimum, Ronnie Chasen's autopsy should have been public record and should have been available. And it's now 2 years later, and I'm asking for the autopsy, and the coroner's office will not release it because they say, well, the Beverly Hills Police Department has got a security hold on it. And I'm like, well, why would they have a security hold? It's a closed case. And so we began to fight with everybody over this, and finally, one of my peers brought to my attention this book called Beverly Hills Confidential. And in this book, there is a chapter on Ronnie Chasen, and the author of this book is very definitive in what they have to say in trying to debunk the conspiracy theories, in saying there's nothing to this story. It was just a random robbery gone bad. Harold Smith tried to rob Ronnie, and he ended up shooting her, blah, blah, blah. And in the book, there were about 9 or 10 crime scene photos. And I looked at this and I'm like, well, wait a minute, how did this author get a hold of crime scene photos if I've been denied all of these things? Well, come to find out, the book was co-written by a forensic specialist with the Beverly Hills Police Department who had worked on the case. So I went back to the department now. This is in 2013. And I said, look, here's the deal. You have an officer working in your department. He wrote a book for profit. He wrote a book that is not part of the scope of his employment. Because you allowed him access to the entire homicide file to draw the conclusions that he drew in the book, you have to give me the same access. I have to be able to obtain the same records. And of course, they refused. They said, we're not going to give you anything. And I said, well, you've got 10 days to do it, and if you don't turn this over in accordance with the Public Records Act in 10 days, I'm going to sue you. And so we sued, and ultimately, after a very, very lengthy process, we lost the court case on a technicality, but upon threatening to refile the case, that's when the city of Beverly Hills began to cooperate, and that's when they began to turn the files over that we had demanded. So everything that's kind of in the film is based on this analysis of the investigation file and all of the things that really don't make sense. And I'm sorry that was so long-winded.
No, that's fine.
It's such a bizarre story.
It is.
I mean, Ryan obviously knows much more than I do, but when I was going through, like, when he would show the cases to me, and I'd be like on set, so to speak, and we'd be seeing all these different photos and all these different investigations, it's like you all these questions start going in your head. Like, even me, someone who doesn't have the years and years and years and years experience dealing with this case or learning all this, because there's so much information that I would see Ryan looking over and I'm like, I can't imagine. He's been going at this for years after years after years. And even the things I would hear, the things I would see just in passing or just seeing it, just that doesn't make sense. Why does this look like this? This is crazy. And I watch a lot of Law and Order, don't get me wrong, but I'm not like a law technical kind of guy. And for me to see that and think this just blatantly doesn't make sense. Right. And like we'd be looking at like comparison photos, what this should be. Merle, who's someone who's doing amazing investigation work for us, for forensics, and seeing his perspective on things too, a working professional actively in the field. And just hearing him, and he'd ask questions about me, like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And like, it doesn't make sense. And also, another one of my favorite shows, Judge Judy, she always said, if something doesn't make sense, it's probably not true. Yeah. And if it doesn't, then half the stuff I've heard in this case doesn't make sense. Right. So this project has been more, not even just like actively working on it, but just opening up my brain. Like what you think you're told and what, they're saying this is definitely what happened. You can't always trust that, because when you look at everything black and white and not look at all the colors, you miss so much. Right. And that's what this investigation is kind of teaching me. Like there's so many little things that if you don't pay attention to, you're going to miss. And that's why it's these shows like Making a Murderer, or the one we're doing with Ronnie Chasen, or like all these different true crime series that are coming out. It's so popular because it's kind of showing you the other side of the curtain that you maybe not have looked at, and you wouldn't know that if you didn't investigate yourself. And so like with Ryan's research and what we're seeing and what we're looking at, it's fascinating. Yeah. Because you start to think, wow, like this doesn't make sense. Then you dive deeper and you're like, well, then that doesn't make sense. Yeah. It's incredible. And it's definitely a project that I think people are going to look at and be like, if they didn't know Ronnie before, they're going to know her now. Right.
It does spark up a lot more questions.
Most definitely. I feel like I know Ronnie. I feel like we were best friends, and I never met her one time while she was alive, But I mean, the one thing that was very eye-opening about the case was the final report that closes the case that was filed by the Beverly Hills Police Department. The final report actually says, when it breaks down the victim and it breaks down the suspect, and it says that, okay, well, Harold Smith killed himself, and this report acknowledges that Harold Smith, that we do not know if Ronnie and Harold Smith knew each other in any way or had ever crossed paths before. We also acknowledge that there is literally no evidence in this case connecting the two of them, and there is no evidence that connects Harold Smith to this crime. But just the same, we believe that he did it. Case closed. You do not close homicide files, okay? You do not close a case as big as this one by saying, well, this might have happened, okay? Right. Alexa, let me pose a scenario to you. As a woman, and not even necessarily as a woman, I think it applies to any of us. I think I would answer the question the same way. But let me put you in this car, okay, at midnight on Sunset Boulevard, and you're sitting here by yourself, and you're waiting on this light to turn green. And you're sitting here at this long light, and you look over and you see an African-American guy. You see, in fact, it does not matter what color. You just see this guy coming at you, whether he's Hispanic, white, black, green, purple, whatever, okay? And he's coming at you, and he's got a menacing, shifty look on his face, okay? He's got his hands in his pocket, okay? And he's walking up to your car. There's no traffic anywhere around you. What are you going to do?
Go.
Hit the pedal.
Exactly.
Go.
You're going to hit the gas, and you're going to get out of there, okay? It's the same thing I would do. I mean, I don't know what this guy is up to. I don't know if this guy's got his hands in his pockets. Does he have a gun? I'm sure as hell not sticking around and waiting to see what he's got up his sleeve. And when you ask, I've asked all of Ronnie's friends, what would you do? And they've all said the same thing. And they all agree that she would have done the same thing, that she was no hero. But yet the Beverly Hills Police Department, in their closing report, they hypothesize that Ronnie was sitting at the light, and that this individual came up, and that because her window was down on the driver's side by about 2 inches, they reasoned that he walked up to the driver's side of the car, standing in the middle of Sunset Boulevard, and that he had some kind of exchange with her. You know, maybe he asked her, "Do you have any spare change?" Who knows? Mm-hmm. And that she said something to him that completely pissed him off. And he ended up walking around the car. Now, we have a twin of that car, okay? And from the passenger of the driver's side to the passenger side to walk around that is 26 feet, and it takes roughly about 6.5 seconds to make that walk, okay? So the police want us to believe that she said something that unhinged him, that he walked around the car up to the passenger side, pulled a gun, and shot her 4 times, and that she sat here for almost 7 seconds waiting for him to go around her car. She would have hit the gas and she would have been gone. Right. And I further argue she would have never engaged him at the window to begin with. Right. She would have been too much of a chicken.
Yeah.
What I also find so fascinating about this is from just a pedestrian perspective, you have cases that, and it shouldn't matter whether you're, a prominent figure or if you're just an average, everyday, average Joe American, but like, there are cases that happened years ago that are still open for investigation. And it's amazing to me that you have somebody who was such a prominent, female progressive person in this industry, someone that started careers of so many people, someone that was beloved by so many people, someone that had real power in this town. And in her town, it was cut so quick. Right. As opposed to, like Ryan was saying, we don't have all of the evidence to back it up. So when you close it so quickly, someone who hasn't been following the case, maybe I don't know Ronnie at all, like it makes me think there has to be another reason why you're closing this case. And I mean, that's why I love working on this project, because you're learning things and you have to, again, open your mind a little bit more. But it's just at the base level, how can you say that we have all these cases currently, from California to New York, like all across the country, that are still open, that they haven't found the person yet, haven't found the killer. I mean, yet you have something where we don't have all the evidence still, but you're going to cut this one after a short period of time. Yeah. Like that raises instantly questions to me.
Right. No, it does.
So it's the whole story is just, it's so bizarre. Yeah. And it's so important, because this woman did not get, like, she's not getting the in my opinion, like the respect with what happened to her done until this, because now it's finally like she's finally going to get justice for Ronnie. Right. Like absolutely. We finally have people that are fighting for her to say, this is what we're trying to figure out. And we might not, Ryan, whoever's, when involved with the project, we might not get that answer, but at least we're trying to figure it out.
No, absolutely.
And I as I always say to people, people will say, well, do you think the killer's still out there? And I say, I don't know. I don't know for sure at this point. We're still walking our way through that at this point. I know our forensic team, they certainly have a very defined opinion in answer to that question. And I know how I feel personally about it. But the one thing that I think that we will succeed completely in doing is we're going to succeed at demonstrating to the public and demonstrating to the people in the industry who are following this and knew Ronnie. We're going to demonstrate what didn't happen on the course of that night and in the course of this murder investigation. Okay, because there's so much that I think that the Beverly Hills Police Department, and I have a really good relationship with Chief Spagnoli, who is the current chief. When she came in and she took over the department, she's been very, very fair and very reasonable and very pleasant to work with me, versus the previous chief, Dave Snowden, who absolutely hated me and called me a conspiracy theorist and whatnot, and that's neither here nor there. But, she has been very, very good to work with. And the one thing I'll say about the old regime with the Beverly Hills Police Department under Dave Snowden is that I think that what really motivated the closure of this case so quickly is because it was a very high-profile case. It was getting a lot of media attention. The department was being hounded fiercely by the media, asking for the answer, who killed this woman. And you go and you question this sort of down-and-out African-American who's been evicted from the building, and he's between jobs. I mean, he's he sort of became the perfect candidate for the department because he's sort of a guy who can't really defend himself.
That's what I was going to ask, because when you started going into this and explaining to me what happened that night, you did go into detail, not full detail, but you did explain thoroughly how the police did a really good investigation. I'm using good loosely.
Yes.
More so on Ronnie and who she was and investigating her as a person. Did they do the same amount of search and investigation for that individual that supposedly killed her? Did they really investigate him, his background, what his motive could have been, why he ended up killing himself afterwards? Like, I mean, a lot of there's more questions than not.
The simple answer to that question is no. Okay. I mean, it's like it took me a great deal of time. It took me not a lot of time to find out everything that I needed to know about Ronnie, who her friends were, who her colleagues were. You know, I was able to reach out to them very quickly. Harold was a huge mystery. Okay, and it took a lot of effort and a lot of time to find out, to sort of get his bio. You know, he pulled the trigger on himself, and to me, he gave the Beverly Hills Police Department the perfect out. You know, we can hang it on this guy. We can say this guy did it, and this guy is not here today to defend himself. Okay, he also was not close to his family. He had been in California since about 1988, 1989, okay? I know these things because I tracked down family members, okay? And he was not close to his family at all. He barely ever talked to them, maybe a few times in 20 years, you know? And this is an easy guy to hang something on, because who's going to jump up and down and say, oh, well, that was my brother, and I know for a fact that he didn't do this, okay? Or that was my son, and you're unfairly accusing him. There was nobody that championed Harold Smith. There was nobody that stood up and said, I don't think Harold would ever do that, you know? And so he was very much an ideal candidate to serve as a scapegoat. And I do believe that that's probably what he was a scapegoat for this whole thing. You know, I have, again, seen nothing, and I'm going by the entire homicide file. There's nothing that links him to this crime as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Ryan, I just want to interject. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't LAPD wanted to help Beverly Hills Police with the investigation? They said, no, we don't need your help.
Well, yeah, that was in the days following the murder, as it began to appear that, you know, this was not going to be a cut and dry, easy case because of the fact that, you know, there were so many moving parts, and her life was so big, and she ran a big successful business. LAPD had said to Beverly Hills Police Department, if you need some help with this case, you know, let us know. We're happy to lend a hand. And Beverly Hills Police refused. Now, you have had, Alexa, 10 homicides in as many years in Beverly Hills, okay, versus an average of, 260 to 270 per year in Los Angeles, okay? I think it's safe to say that the LAPD has a lot more expertise and a lot more knowledge in, you know, handling a crime scene than what BHPD does. You know, BHPD is probably pretty good at the garden variety homicide. You know, like, oh, here's the wife. We found the wife dead. Okay, here's the husband. Oh, look, the husband took out $1 million life insurance policy 2 months ago. You know, that's the kind of cases. I'm not trying to be a jerk or trying to be funny or anything, but those are the kinds of cut and dried cases that I think that they're pretty good at. Okay, this is something different. And the other thing that you have to remember is, you know, as I said earlier, what is murder usually about? Murder is revenge, murder is sex, murder is money. Okay? And what was the one thing that we know about Ronnie that she had plenty of?
It was
Money, moolah.
Yeah.
Money.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
You know,
we're just like, yeah. We thought it was rhetorical, but yes.
And I
the
mean,
woman was worth millions, and she was worth millions more than what the probate court said that she was worth, because the probate court didn't know about certain retirement accounts and 401ks and that kind of stuff. Okay?
no, Ryan, here's a question for you. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. I want to interrupt you. I was going to say, would you also argue and say that another motive for murder could potentially be power and influence?
That still stems to money, though.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
No, I don't see it as being power and influence. Murder, I think, based upon, you know, the statistics and what I've read and what I've seen and all that. Murder, more than anything, is generally about money. It's about somebody who thinks that they're going to get something if this person is dead, whether it's through stealing it from them or whether it's through their will. Okay, and that's a very interesting. That's another aspect of Ronnie's story that's very, very interesting. Was that in 1994, when Ronnie was worth about $350,000, you know, as she was striking out on her own to start her company, she wrote a will, and she gave everything in that will to her niece Melissa. Okay. Aside from some money to different charities and whatnot, Melissa got everything. We know for fact that in 2006, Ronnie did a brand new will, okay? And one of her friends, you know, allegedly signed it as Ronnie's witness, okay? In the days after her murder, they tore every place apart that they could think of, from her home to her office to wherever, to try and find that 2006 will. And that will simply vanished into thin air. Okay, and we know she had it because we have the declaration of the attorney who prepared it, who filed a declaration before the probate court saying, "I know that there's a 2006 will because Ronnie had me prepare it for her." Okay, and so where did that will go? And the question becomes, what changes were made between 1994 and 2006, okay? And then it gets a little bit more complicated because she had told several of her closest friends in 2010, right around the time that she was murdered and just before, that she was actively working on a 2010 will and making some changes and making some updates, okay? When they could not find any notes for 2010, and they could not find a 2006 executed will, the only thing that they could do at that point was go off of the 1994 will. So that's what they had to do at that point. And, of course, that gave the bulk of the entire estate. The entire thing was set up as a trust, and that went to her niece. And, you know, one of the things that you do when you are the police and there's a murder is you investigate the people closest to the victim.
Right.
Okay, if they're married, obviously, if Ronnie were married at the time, they would have gone and they would have looked at her husband. Okay, and they would have ruled him out before they looked at anybody else because it's usually that person that's responsible.
Right.
You know, in the case of Ronnie, she had certain people who were close to her, and in my opinion, I don't think that they were looked at. I don't think that the Beverly Hills Police Department took their investigation nearly far enough.
Now, did they do, or was there any actual, besides the statement that was taken, any further investigation after, what was his name, the gentleman that...
After Harold Smith?
Harold. Okay, after Harold killed himself, did they look further into the person that led them to Harold? Like, why would this person know this information?
The answer to that is no.
Okay.
The America's Most Wanted tipster was never, ever looked at in terms of, you know, the possibility of his involvement or him being a suspect. That was never looked at. There were so many people that the Beverly Hills Police Department didn't look at. The Beverly Hills Police Department, it is very evident to me, believed the statement of the America's Most Wanted tipster without any form of question whatsoever. And I'm not saying that the tipster was in any way involved or anything. I'm just saying that they never looked. They took him at face value, took his statement, and that was it. And of course, he went on later, some months later, to claim the $100,000 reward that was offered by the Palm Springs International Film Festival.
Are you familiar with the silent movie theater Homicide?
Not really.
Okay. The reason why I want to bring that up quickly is the owner of the silent movie theater. He was killed in the theater, and someone came in and made it look like a robbery, killed the person behind the concession stand, and then went upstairs and killed him. After a lot of investigating, it turned out that it was a hired kill. And the only reason why it fell...
You know what, this does kind of sound familiar. This actually does sound familiar, yeah.
And they were able to... The only reason why they were able to finally get the case where it was and figure everything out, put all the pieces together, was because the person that hired that individual to kill and make it look like a botched robbery, was because they were a part of the will, and they said, after this person dies, I'm going to give you X amount of money. So he kept promising X amount of money. He didn't have it. And so the person started getting anxious for his money, and everything kind of just went to pieces at that point. That's the only reason why I bring that up, because it sounds, not that it sounds exactly the same, but it does sound like there is obviously more to it. Now, before we go on, I'm being told that we have to wrap it up. I didn't get into as far as I wanted to, so I would love to have you all come back. Mm-hmm. I do want to discuss this even more further. I want to go into your other project. Can you, Robert, can you really quickly say the name of the other project?
Oh, yeah. So me and Diana right now are working on a feature film called To the Bitter End. Okay. Shoestring budget. It's essentially a psychological thriller. Okay. It involves murder. For some reason, everything's always around murder. All right. But it's going to be out in fall of 2019. And then me and Ryan created a film, By the Grace of God, which will be hitting festivals this fall as well. Awesome.
Mm-hmm. So real quick, because I do have to wrap it up, anywhere where they can find you, website, social media?
Yeah, so my social media handle is kind of long, but it's Robert_M_Anderson. Mm-hmm. If you're interested in updates about me and Diana's film To the Bitter End, it's just a hashtag To the Bitter End. And same thing with Grace of God. It's hashtag By the Grace of God. You'll find stills, you'll find information, and then we're going to be posting things regularly as we keep getting more on festival circuit and nominations and such.
And the Ronnie Chasen, we have a Facebook page, 638, The Death of Ronnie Chasen. You could find that on Facebook.
Perfect. I'll go ahead and add all that. Ryan, anywhere they can find you if you want to disclose any of that, websites or whatnot?
Actually, no. I pretty much kind of, aside from a private Facebook page, stay off of social media.
No problem. I'll keep it that way. So I'll go ahead. I do want you guys to come back. I do have to wrap it up. I do thank you all for being a guest and bringing some insight. And let's make this to be continued.
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Everyone,
let's do it during the spring months when I don't have to worry about any snow.
Absolutely, will do. Everyone, please have a safe and happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. Stay dry.
Have a great day, everyone. I know this story is so intriguing.
You're listening to Female Filmmakers Fuse with Alexa Poehler and Robin Pabello, only on LA Talk Radio.